Hey, so a quick book update, I suppose, what I've been reading and recommending in May and June. It's not a huge list. I'm well aware that reading is work. We have the research that says after years of using social media, like people's brains are not focusing as well. So be kind to yourself. If you're someone, particularly a new mum who would like to read and is struggling, I'm someone who didn't do it for like 10 years. That might surprise you, but after academia, there was like 10 years where I would not pick up a book because I found it anxiety provoking. So I've clearly gotten over that. Decided, I guess, if I had time to scroll social media and read wine labels, then I probably had time to read books. And then I read a couple. So yeah, books I think are helpful if you're in a phase with therapy, like a lot of people are in Australia at the moment, where you're coming up to having used those 10 Medicare sessions. Obviously, self-help books and things like that are not a replacement for therapy, but I do think they are a good adjunct. And I've been finding myself more and more recommending books here and there when I know someone needs some information and some tools like to top them up along the way. So I'm going to give you like an overview of just a few things I've been reading lately. Some of them are absolutely nothing to do with perinatal mental health or anything, by the way, just interesting, take it or leave it. And then at the end, I'm going to give you like 3 books that I recommend a lot like for new parents or even parents who are kind of, not in the brand new parent phase, just because I think it would be helpful. So I don't want this to be too long. It's been a lot of audio books lately, which probably says a lot about where my brain is at and what I'm able to process as well. So I'll flash up a picture of what the book looks like on my phone. It's not going to be anything fancy, but it's not the same as holding a pile of physical books. There's no aesthetic around that, but I'm going to do my best. So my best book is this one, Life in the Five Senses. I think whenever there is the option to listen to the author read the book and you can stand the author's voice, then that's a good option to go for, because I think it just cements your learning better. So this is Gretchen Rubin's new book. This was really like quite a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this one because I think with coping tools and I like a full sensory approach. There are certain senses that get neglected, smell and taste, for example. Like we tell people to look at the horizon and count 5 things and use grounding strategies like that, but we forget about some of the other senses. What was fun about this as well is that part of the marketing campaign, they had like a quiz so you could find your most neglected sense. And I discovered that my most neglected sense is taste. Cue like living in a house with small children who like bland food. So it means for me there's been some things to think about there in terms of like finding joy and finding delight in like mixing it up a bit with flavors. So I think if you're looking to expand like this sense of like self-care and self-care practices and just if you're more into like mindfulness and being in the moment and just appreciating what's around you, this is like kind of mindfulness microed into like here's how to like actually look at your environment and interact with it. So not just for parents, for anyone, but I think for parents especially, like it's just so much like nothingness in the groundhog days of parenting sometimes. So I've been recommending this one about life in 5 senses to just think about what you're neglecting, what are you missing in life. So yeah, I love Gretchen Rubin's work. So that was another good one from her. The next one is nothing to do with mental health in particular at all, but you could say it's got everything to do with mental health. This one, Feeding the Soul from Tabitha Brown. So I love Tabitha Brown. I just really wanted to listen to her voice to go to sleep. I caught myself one of the days thinking, I wish she read like something on the car map. And I wonder if she's got a book. And she does. She's got a couple now, I think. I don't use social media anymore. Obviously, read a book on that. But Tabitha was really someone I enjoyed watching. She has a YouTube channel, so I look at that occasionally. If you don't know who she is, she's how do you even describe Tabitha? She's, I guess, someone who made veganism less intimidating. So she does a lot of cooking, but even if you're not into cooking or you're not into plant-based living or anything like that, she's just so entertaining. She just has such a unique voice, and I think she's a great testament for just being yourself, using your own voice, and it's just like syrupy listening to this. So I listened to this to go to sleep. I couldn't really tell you much about what she says in this book. It's more like just put it on and fall asleep, that kind of book. So if you're looking for something like that, I would give this one a go. My next one, less about mental health again, but sort of, I read 2 of his books this month. I started with The Art of Growing Up, and then I am just finishing this one, Take Risks. So if you're Australian, you've probably heard of John Marsden. Most of us read his books like youth fiction in high school. It didn't occur to me that he had non-fiction books. So as my kids are getting further into their education system, I'm finding myself just more curious about educational perspectives and philosophies and some of the kind of culture that is there. So I think he's very opinionated. I don't think that's a surprise, but it's refreshing to read, I guess, some perspectives about where do we want to go. I mean, this isn't even COVID-based stuff, but thinking about, like, for example, in this book about Take Risks, I guess the anecdote I'll give there is that he gives an example about, like, climbing trees is banned in a bunch of schools in Tasmania, or maybe it was just one. Don't quote me on it, I can't quite remember. The important part of that is me thinking as a parent, like, yeah, I want to protect my children from danger, blah, 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 but I don't want to raise my kids in a world where we're not climbing trees. The litigation in education has gone that far. So as we get out of this bubble, who knows what all that is going to mean in the next 10 to 20 years plus of being in lockdown and going through COVID and anxiety and all that kind of stuff. We want to think like, oh, we want our children to take risks. How are we going to do that? So yeah, if you're curious about education and about schools and how they work, and to some extent even like the business of a school, it might be interesting to have a look at his non-fiction books. So there's one called Take Risks, which is the picture I just flashed up there, and then there's another one called The Art of Growing Up. Then we've got physical books. I did actually read some physical books. As I researched my third book on parental burnout, I've been looking for what you might call like character studies, I suppose. I think it's useful, and it can be useful. A technique I use a lot in therapy is this idea of like finding someone who embodies the qualities that you're looking for in a moment. So if you're not finding yourself feeling very strong or very confident, think about embodying the qualities of someone who does. And so I think after the last few years that we've all been through, looking in history for examples of strong mothers who got through difficult things can be useful, not as a point of like, oh, she had it worse than me, so I can't complain, but just as a moment of like giving some thought to things. So I've been reading this biography of Coretta Scott King. It's called Coretta, My Life, My Love, My Legacy. It's a difficult read in some parts, but very important reading, and it reminds us like, wow, what she went through while pregnant, raising small children, like, you know, houses being burnt down, bricks through the window, your husband being in jail all the time, and she got through it, and she got through it with such grace. So I think if you're looking for examples of how am I going to get through the day, sometimes it can be go and think like, well, what would Coretta do? Okay, it might not be Coretta Scott, it might be someone else. But who is someone, living or imagined? But I think for most of us living through this parenting experience at the moment, go and find a historical figure who got through hard things and just take a couple of snippets. This is what I've been doing. Like, oh, all right, okay, we can do hard things. Parents can do hard things. So that's one that, as I said, I've been researching for a book, but I also think it's helpful to just have a snippet of someone in history who's gone through something hard and see if you can kind of just like bring those qualities into mind. My next one is very matchy-matchy with my outfit. I've been looking for a book like this for quite a while, actually. This is called Dissociation Made Simple, a stigma-free guide to embracing your dissociative mind and navigating daily life by Jamie Marich. Now, Jamie Marich has got heaps of content out into the world. Very, very, very gracious, generous person. I think if you are at all curious about trauma, dissociation, EMDR, so eye movement desensitization, reprocessing therapy, any of that kind of stuff, or having parts, having alters, having like challenging mental health stuff, right? She is someone who is a health professional and speaks about it really openly and really in a way that's just reflexive, easy to follow. I think I remember reading on probably like the Amazon reviews somewhere that someone likened it to as being as important as this one, if I've got it. Yeah, The Body Keeps the Score. You know how Vandercox like just so prolific at the moment. Like he's gone from this researcher from the 80s that I kind of studied a little bit when I did some trauma stuff in my uni years, and now he's just like famous, like super famous. But the point I was trying to make is it's as important as that book, but maybe like a little bit easier to digest. So we all have dissociation to some degree, to some extent. If it's something that you're interested in, or potentially you work in trauma, you're going to have people who have dissociation. This is a really helpful book, and I would, I'd recommend that one. All right. That's my kind of quick wrap up of what I've been reading. I wanted to just chuck on a couple of extras here because these are the books I recommend all the time. I only have 2 of them here. I think I've loaned one. But the first one, this is like, I'll just talk about this until I'm blue in the face pretty much. The Postnatal Depletion Cure. It's such like, it's if you work in perinatal, or you've had a baby, or you know someone who's had a baby, this is just like gold. It's the holistic kind of comforting, make sense of hormones, nutrition, sleep, community, environment, everything that I wish everybody would read. It's almost like the kind of footnote for like if you've got depression, or you've got postnatal anxiety or perinatal anxiety. I also want people to read this to see how much of postnatal depletion is part of that story, because depression and anxiety, super common, very, very real, but also depleting. Like having a baby is really, really, really depleting. And I think Oscar goes into so much good detail, manageable detail, like down to the, like you get smoothie recipes and everything. Like he talks about, vitamin deficiencies that you might want to be tested for, different cultural things. Like it's just such a winner, and I wish every GP would read it. The next one I recommend a lot, which has a different name now. It had a UK release. I think now it's called Parents Happy Kids or something like that. But the one I've got, the original one, is called Peaceful Parent Happy Kids: How to Stop Yelling and Start Connecting. And that's Laura Markham. She's really the go-to person for that. This one is useful for people who lose their temper a lot and need to find the words for what they want to be able to say instead. So sometimes I recommend this one because it's just got lots of small useful hints. Okay, so you can flip and turn. You don't have to read this cover to cover. You can just flip any page and go, okay, when your child is getting overexcited or too revved up, when your kids are fighting a lot, like just snippets about what to do, what to say. So it's very like hands-on teaching emotional regulation for a lot of us who did not get taught really effective emotion regulation techniques from our parents, potentially. So it's just going to help you to be more of that like adult, rational, calm person that you're aiming to be. So that's the one I usually recommend for people there. The last one, I've talked about this book before as well. Let me see if I can find it, because I listened to the audio. Oh, I think I do have a copy of the audiobook here. It's called The Power of Fun by Catherine Price. There we go. And here we go. Yeah. Power of Fun. I think it has a slightly different cover now, maybe a dark one. It's all confetti. It's very backlit. You can't even, there's not really much use in showing this. So Power of Fun by Catherine Price. This is a really good one for mums who have lost their sense of self, lost their sense of joy, lost their sense of delight, don't really know what it is they're interested in anymore, and have settled. Like I talk about in my book, it's up there, Social Media Detox for Mums, about how we've settled for like good enough fun, like scrolling, playing Candy Crush on your phone. Like there's nothing wrong with those things, but like over time, do you still want to be like 80 years old saying like, oh, I'm so glad for all that time I spent on Instagram? So this will maybe give you some hints to try and figure out what is it that you find fun? What is it that you find enjoyable? And say the mums I've been recommending this book who've been in a bit of a rut have said it's been really useful. So I thought I'll add it here as well and see if anyone else finds it helpful. As I said, it's like there's so many books, but you know, if you hire a psychologist who's also an author, they're going to give you book recommendations. It's not for everybody, but for some people that might be helpful to just find a couple of snippets for things to make your life better. That's what it's all about.